Welcome to this HRD Summit podcast. I'm joined today by Richard Olivier, Artistic Director at Olivier Mythodrama. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you.
Richard, Olivier Mythodrama provide leadership training and development using elements of theatre practice, psychology and organisational development. How do you bring all of those elements together in your programmes?
Well, we use the story as a container of learning, so it becomes a kind of narrative frame. So we invite people, to imaginatively kind of step into alternative case studies, if you like. We could think of it as a mythic case study, what we do, and then to kind of bring their own leadership live issues to bear as a mirror against those mythic case studies. So we go on a journey through the play, and we find that, the psychology of the characters we're meeting and the psychology that's present in their leadership issues is one really important part. Their capacity to change role occasionally or change their habitual way of behaving in order to meet those leadership issues will be another very important part. And then obviously the organizational development context in which the organization is operating becomes, the context for the whole intervention with the client. So we mix the three together kind of in a slightly different way depending who we're working with.
Thank you. Olivier Mythodrama are well known for using Shakespearean plays, as you say, to address different leadership issues. Why Shakespeare and how can he help?
Well, I think Shakespeare is one of the world geniuses in literature. And he happened to be writing at a time of great change and great complexity at the end of the first Elizabethan era, when fundamental questions were being asked about leadership. What's the remit of leadership? What are the ethics of leadership? Who are the kind of people we want in power? Who are the kind of people we don't want in power? Who wants power? All these questions were burning topics, in the 1590s and early 1600s. And Shakespeare, combined with his genius, is able to bring these, I would call them eternal leadership questions, to life, in a very memorable and dramatic way. And so we find that of all the authors I've studied, including much more modern ones, actually Shakespeare has more depth and more breadth around leadership issues in a number of his plays. Not all of them, but we use about 8 of them that we've found so far to really have a insightful narrative that can teach people about their own leadership as well as leadership in general.
One of the Shakespearean plays that you use is Henry V. What is it about this play specifically that works so well in a modern day business context?
Well, I think everyone who meets the story of Henry V at any level of leadership recognizes themselves in it. It starts a young man stepping up from a prince to a king, which can be stepping up, to any new level of an organization. He has to listen to all the people who've been around him beforehand, take advice. He has to build consent around a new mission and a new vision for the future through Act 1. When he finally gets agreement on that, Act 2 is about preparing for action, and that is both making sure the right people are on the ship and the wrong people are off the ship, as well as internal preparation for what needs to change in a leadership or organizational culture. Act 3 takes us into action when things are stuck on the ground, and we see Henry having to use personal influencing techniques both to motivate his own troops and paint negative pictures for the opposition. And then when we get into Act 4, which is the Battle of Agincourt historically, it's the long dark night of the soul before the battle, where leaders, before a big risk, have to really ask themselves if they're doing the right thing and if they're really the right people to do it. And that's often the most popular part of the play, looking at our own capacity, important capacity for doubt, and how we can re-inspire ourselves in the midst of doubt in tough or uncertain times, which, again, we seem to be surrounded by right now. And then Act 5 really offers an interesting perspective. We call it turning the battlefield into the garden. So, many organizations are compulsively driven to growth and success, And we argue that truly inspirational leaders need to be able to create the garden as well as the battlefield for the next action, and give people time to restore, reflect, learn, reward, and then move forward once they're replenished, not to rush too quickly from project to project. At least give the organization the sense of space every so often. So we find that as a kind of project map, a kind of mythic project map, is a very compelling story, and that every leader, I think, pretty much we've ever worked with in 20 years now, has met themselves in it at one point or another.
Can you tell me a little bit more about how the Olivier Mythodrama approach of experiential learning works for leadership development?
Sure. Well, I mean, what we do, having used the story to kind of get people engaged, we then look at models of organizational development and talk with the HR directors of the organization we're working with to find out what other models may be in common parlance in the company, so we can bring those in and overlap them and add some intellectual stimulus to the debate. We bring in, discussion and sometimes appropriate argument to surface what are the hidden issues around particular ventures, particular projects, or even leadership styles in the company, particularly, if it's after a merger or some big change, just to help people recalibrate their internal culture. And that would be in discussion and in exercise. We use archetypal psychology, so we have different characters, if you like, primary leadership styles that we work with, that people can recognize themselves in it, and we have exercises for them to experiment flexing into different characters and trying out different behaviors. And then some of the wonderful Shakespeare speeches and some of the other poems that we bring that have a reflection on a leadership context or people in positions of power, trying to get things done. There's a poetic aspect to it as well that touches people's hearts. So really we're mixing, the head, the heart, and the body for full experiential learning. And we find that it seems to be a very complete package for people.
I see. Thank you very much for joining us today, Richard. We look forward to seeing you at the summit in January.
Me too. Thank you.
To learn more about the programme for the HRD Summit, visit our website at www.hrdsummit.com.